All right, so we're diving in today, and you wanted to look at Bitcoin Cash, right?
Hey, Bitcoin Cash.
And its potential, and we're not just talking about like where it's at right now, but where it could go in the future.
Exactly.
And, even a prompt like this, it's so simple, but it brings up so many questions like,
Right.
what aspects of potential are we even talking about here?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
we talking about like its price? Are we talking about its adoption by, everyday people?
Mm.
Are we talking about its role in pushing the boundaries of like what cryptocurrency can even do?
Well, I think that's what's so fascinating about this topic is potential can be such a subjective thing.
It really can.
And for some people, the potential of Bitcoin Cash might be all about it becoming like this everyday payment system that everyone's using,
Yeah, exactly.
while others might be more interested in its potential as like a long-term store of value,
Yeah,
like digital gold.
right, like a safe haven almost.
Exactly. So to really kind of dig into this, we need to look at, I think, what are the factors that drive the success of any cryptocurrency?
Okay, so let's get into that then. What are those factors?
Yeah.
What are some things that we should be paying attention to when we try to figure out, okay, does this cryptocurrency have potential or not?
Yeah, for sure. So there are a few key things.
Go.
First and foremost, the technology itself.
Hmm.
Is it scalable? Can it handle a ton of transactions, very quickly and cheaply?
Right.
Because that's going to be important if we're talking about mass adoption.
Yeah, if everybody's going to be using this thing, it's got to be able to move.
Exactly. Then you have the community aspect.
Okay.
Is there like a really strong and active group of developers and users who are actually working on this cryptocurrency using it?
Yeah, it can't just be like, three guys in a basement.
Exactly. You need that kind of vibrant ecosystem.
Right.
Then there's the whole thing about real world use cases.
Okay.
Where is this cryptocurrency actually being used? What are the real world problems that it's solving?
Yeah,
Because ultimately that's what's going to drive adoption.
it has to have some utility, right? Like some purpose.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we can't ignore the regulatory landscape.
Yeah, that's a big one.
How are governments and regulators around the world viewing this particular cryptocurrency? And then, of course, just the overall market sentiment.
Yeah, the vibes, the feeling.
Keep vibes.
Okay, so that's a really good framework, I think, for thinking about the potential of any cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to Bitcoin Cash specifically now.
Okay, yeah.
How does it stack up against those factors that you just mentioned? And maybe before we even get into that, for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with it, can you give us just a quick rundown, like what is Bitcoin Cash?
For sure. So Bitcoin Cash was created back in 2017
Okay.
as a fork of Bitcoin. And now a fork, in simple terms, is basically like a split in the blockchain that
Okay.
results in two separate cryptocurrencies. And in this case,
So like a family feud.
it's like, yeah, a crypto family feud.
Yeah.
The debate was all about block size.
Yeah.
Larger blocks can actually hold more transactions, and that leads to faster and cheaper processing, which is exactly what Bitcoin Cash was aiming for.
So it sounds like they definitely accomplished that, right? Like making transactions faster and cheaper, especially compared to Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I mean, in a world where everybody wants everything instantly and they don't want to pay high fees, right?
Right.
That speed and that affordability, those are huge, huge selling points.
Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I've definitely noticed like the fees on Bitcoin, they can get kind of crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
But you mentioned that there was a split. There was this, crypto family feud
Yeah,
that had some consequences as well.
it did.
So what were some of the downsides there?
Yeah, so the Bitcoin community was really divided on the best way to scale Bitcoin.
Okay.
And that division, it ultimately impacted Bitcoin Cash's adoption.
So basically it didn't have that same like unified front pushing it forward.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so it doesn't have the same level of recognition then as Bitcoin.
Yeah. It
Doesn't have that like same network effect.
Not at all.
Yeah, I remember back when the fork happened, there was a lot of talk about like, okay, which chain is going to win, which one is going to take over.
Right.
And it's interesting to see how things have actually played out.
Yeah.
So this idea of network effect, could you explain that a bit more? Like, why is that so important for a cryptocurrency?
For sure. Think of it this way. The more people who are actually using a network,
Right.
the more valuable that network becomes.
Okay.
So Bitcoin, It had that early mover advantage. It had widespread recognition. It was like the first one that everybody knew about.
Right.
And that gave it a huge network effect, which then attracts more users, developers, businesses. It creates this, positive feedback loop.
Yeah, it kind of snowballs.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Now, Bitcoin Cash coming in later and with, a smaller community, it faces a real uphill battle.
Yeah, it's almost like that first mover advantage. You can't really replicate that.
Exactly. It's really hard to beat.
Okay, so is it fair to say that basically Bitcoin Cash traded off some of that network effect to achieve that speed and affordability that it has?
Absolutely. It's a classic trade-off.
Yeah.
There often isn't one perfect solution, right?
All right.
Especially in the tech world.
Yeah, so I guess for our listeners out there, something to think about is if you were designing a cryptocurrency, what would you prioritize? Would you go for, the raw speed and the low cost, like Bitcoin Cash did? Or would you try to build the biggest network possible? There's no right answer, but it's something to think about.
Absolutely.
So Bitcoin Cash is not a Bitcoin killer,
Right.
but it's still got some potential, right?
It definitely does. It definitely does.
So what could happen that would allow Bitcoin Cash to really reach its potential?
A few things come to mind.
Okay.
Wider merchant adoption would be huge.
Okay.
If you could just use Bitcoin Cash to buy your coffee at Starbucks or to, buy groceries, I think that would make a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, further innovation on the technology itself could give it a real edge.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's always happening in the crypto space, right? There's always new development. There's always tweaking of things.
Absolutely. And it's a fast-moving space.
It makes you wonder, what if Bitcoin Cash kind of becomes the cryptocurrency that everybody uses for everyday transactions?
Yeah.
Well, Bitcoin becomes more like digital gold, like that safe haven asset.
I think that's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
The crypto world's constantly evolving, so ultimately, whether or not Bitcoin Cash really lives up to its potential, I think it's going to depend on a lot of factors.
It's hard to predict, right?
It's hard to predict, yeah.
Especially with so many things happening.
Exactly. And a lot of those factors, they haven't even played out yet.
Totally. I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
So for all of you listening out there, if ease of use and transaction speed are so important,
Yeah.
why hasn't Bitcoin Cash just taken over? What's holding it back? And could those barriers change in the future? These are all questions to consider as you dive deeper into the crypto world.
Absolutely.
Until next time.